Alcohol, city manager.
Mayor and council, we've got present Hayhire Liquors, and they made a presentation to you on Monday night. I believe if you've had a chance to check your email today, I forwarded to you an email this afternoon that we received from our city attorney, and that is, you got a copy? Yep. Okay. And that is here. Do you want me to read that, Mayor, or what would you like for me to do? Okay. This was from our city attorney, legal counsel, Ron Plum, to the mayor and council. Dear Mayor and Council, I have been asked to give an opinion on certain proposed changes to the city's alcoholic beverage ordinance requested by the owners of Hayhire Liquors. Specifically, Hayhire Liquors is requesting that the city amend the ordinance to require that liquor stores be located at least 1 mile from each other. By liquor stores, I'm assuming that they are referring to stores that will sell distilled spirits, as defined in the ordinance, rather than stores that only sell beer or wine. As I understand it, Hayhire Liquors is the only licensed seller of distilled spirits or liquor in the city. A distance requirement of 1 mile between liquor stores would effectively prevent any other business from being able to obtain a license to sell liquor in the city. And he also had a radius map showing the affected radius of 1 mile. Cities have broad discretion in regulating the sale of alcoholic beverages under the general police powers, provided that there is a rational basis for the regulation that satisfies the constitutional due process requirement of equal protection. The rational basis test requires that the regulation be reasonable and not arbitrary, and rest upon some ground of difference, having a fair and rational relationship to the legislation's legitimate objective, so that all similarly situated persons are treated alike. In the case of Consolidated Government of Columbus versus Barwick, courts have upheld city regulations limiting hours of sale and distance requirements from schools, churches, other licensed businesses, and others, where the city showed that those regulations were related to a legitimate public objective, such as limiting congestions of bars, promoting business in certain districts, and the like. In Columbus versus Barwick, the court upheld a city regulation prohibiting the issuance of a liquor license for a business within 600 feet of another business with a liquor license, where the city code created an exception waiving the distance requirement in the city's riverfront zoning district. The court found that this regulation did not violate the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution because the regulations were based on legitimate distinctions between zoning districts and legitimate goals of protecting against dangerous overpopulation and proliferation of bars in certain areas where encouraging business development, including bars and restaurants, and others. However, in other cases, the courts have held that other regulations, such as residency requirements and the like, which were primarily aimed at protecting certain business interests or keeping out competition, is not legal. In Atlanta Taxi Cab Company Owners Association Incorporated versus the City of Atlanta, holding that a city may regulate business which affects public health, safety, and welfare, but it may not deprive an individual of his right to conduct lawful business unless it can be shown that such deprivation is reasonably related to the interests sought to be protected. Where there was no relationship between the required residency and the valid governmental interest, it is economic protectionism which creates an artificial barrier to commerce and violates the Commerce Clause. In the current case, the City Code already contains distance requirements prohibiting the issuance of alcoholic beverage licenses to businesses within certain distances of schools, churches, alcohol treatment centers, and etc. There is also a state law prohibiting the issuance of a license for retail sales of distilled spirits within 500 yards of another business holding a distilled spirits license. Given the size of the city and the location and number of schools and churches, the existing regulations appear to pretty effectively guard against overpopulation of liquor stores and bars. In my opinion, the existing regulations also would stand up to court scrutiny since they are based on recognized legitimate objectives of limiting the sale of alcoholic beverages in close proximity to schools, churches, and etc. In the request to be added to the agenda, Hayhire Liquors states that the future sustainability of Hayhire Liquors is in jeopardy if another liquor store were allowed to open within the city limits. And their request for amendment of the alcoholic beverage ordinance is aimed at preventing a competing business from being able to obtain a license in the city. It is certainly within the council's power to amend your current regulations to change those distance requirements if the changes are based on legitimate public objectives. However, changes that have the effect of unfairly limiting competition and shielding a certain business interest with no other legitimate justification would probably not hold up to scrutiny by the courts if challenged. Of course, you are under no obligation to make any changes if you do not feel they are necessary. If you choose to amend the existing regulations, the changes should be based on stated public policy objectives rather than protecting certain business interests. Signed, Robert A. Plum, Jr., Langdale, Walton.
Okay, I need a, what, council pleasure?
Can I comment on that? You know, our ordinance, what we have in our ordinance and what the state came up with, maybe we should readdress our ordinance and change the way we do the measurements. We don't want this to come up again. We approve something and the state denies it because of the measurements.
Do you have the new regulation on that too?
No, sir.
Which is door to door, correct? What she stated.
Door to door. What the, how the commissioner, the agents done it, it was straight door to door. How we do it down to the center of the highway, down to the center of the road, and then back to the door. They do it in a straight line, straight arrow.
As a profile.
That's correct, yes, sir.
And that, is that in writing somewhere?
Yes. That was their directive.